Jennifer Asbenson is tall, lean, and very pretty. She exudes sweetness, sincerity, and a childlike innocence that is beautiful. She giggles with ease. She's thoughtful before answering questions. She's happy. Although she appears fragile and vulnerable, there is strength, wisdom, and conviction that radiates under the surface. She says, "I don't think I would have been kidnapped or survived if it wasn't for my childhood. Because of the way I was treated at home, I would take risks and trust people. I had no self-esteem, self-respect, or self-love. I was naive." As a kid, Jennifer's father built a dome on a remote parcel of desert land. She had a disabled little brother, and her family struggled financially. They had no running water and no electricity. Jennifer often went without food, shoes, and new clothing. What's worse is her mother mentally and physically abused her over and over again. When Jennifer was rescued from her attack and the first responders came to help, her mother doubted Jennifer's story. Jennifer expected people would show her love, compassion, and provide her with help, but it didn't come. Her mother quipped, "That's what you get for hitchhiking." The blame and betrayal further traumatized Jennifer, and for years after the abduction, she feared her attacker would come after her again. He did have her driver's license and her purse that was left in his car, after all. Some people didn't believe Jennifer's story, while others referred to her as simply, quote unquote, the kidnapped girl. Jennifer was in and out of mental health facilities. She suffered from PTSD and other psychiatric challenges that stemmed from her attack. There was no professional therapeutic help provided to her for the horrific trauma that she had gone through. While confined and given a litany of medications, she questioned her own truth. Welcome to this week's episode. We're going to be discussing the badass that's named Jennifer Asbenson. And we're going to be talking about how she survived her run-in with the serial killer. Hey guys, welcome back. I decided to start shortening that musical introduction. This is episode 32. Finally learning a little bit here and there. But yeah, I shortened that a little bit. So yeah, there's not as much to skip over if you're one of those ones that skips over things like I do sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts. I'm super excited to bring you this new episode. I'm recording on the Thursday before the episode releases. As you know, new episodes are available every Sunday. And I always love to record on Thursdays because it's my day off from my job, and I usually have some privacy in my house because my boyfriend is gone to work. Nobody else is here besides the fur babies, and yeah, they're all taking little naps right now. It's like they're used to this whole podcasting thing already, and they're like, all right, yeah, when mom sits in the room and talks to herself in the microphone, that's when we know we have to be quiet and just take a nap. But anyways, this is an episode about a survivor. I love survivor stories. So not everybody that ran across this serial killer survived, but I'm going to be heavily talking about the woman who did survive. On September 27th of 1992, Jennifer Asbenson was just 19 years old, and she was employed in Desert Hot Springs, California, at a home for disabled young girls. Her shift was scheduled to begin at 10 p.m. that night and would be over at 6 a.m. the next morning. She had recently moved into her own apartment and didn't have access to her parents' car anymore, and she hadn't purchased one of her own yet either. Jennifer went to the bus stop to catch the bus to work like she usually did, but she wasn't exactly sure of the bus schedule. Jennifer ran into a nearby store to buy some candy for the girls real quick, which unfortunately caused her to miss the bus. When she saw that the bus had left without her, she came running out of the store in a complete panic. She knew it was the last bus of the night, and now she had no way to get to work. Her employer had already warned her that if she was ever late for work again, she was going to be terminated. Apparently, being dependent on public transportation wasn't very dependable, and it had caused Jennifer to be late for work more than they had liked. As Jennifer stood there completely upset with herself, suddenly a car pulled up in front of her and a man asked her if she needed a ride. Jennifer thought the man looked totally harmless and she didn't feel any sense of fear. When she got inside the car, he was very nice to her, and she did find him actually to be quite charming. The man began to drive her to work and made small talk with her along the way. Jennifer admitted to him that she was interested in becoming an actress, and he asked her if she was going to do porn. Jennifer thought that was really weird, and she was not wrong. My God, but she laughed it off and just said, "No, you sicko." The man got quiet for a moment, but then he laughed too. Jennifer told the man everything about her work, how she loved everything about it, and that she was incredibly proud about what she did for a living. But she was young and incredibly naive to be telling a complete stranger everything about her work and her work schedule. She went on to tell him that she worked completely alone inside this house with 6 disabled young girls, and that she got off work every morning at 6 a.m., and that she always took the bus home. When they pulled in front of Jennifer's work, the man invited her to have breakfast with him the following morning, but she politely declined. He then asked her for her phone number, and she was honestly uninterested in pursuing anything with him, but she didn't want to hurt his feelings, and she was in a hurry to start her shift at work. So she thought it was easiest if she just gave him a fake number. It was a number that was just 1 digit off from being her real phone number. Jennifer figured it wasn't going to matter because she was never going to see this man again. Jennifer ran into work and started to feel a little strange about what had just happened. So she did call a friend and asked them if they could give her a ride home when she got off work the next morning. But unfortunately, that friend's car had just broken down. So they told Jennifer that unfortunately they weren't going to be able to help her out. Now, as Jennifer ran into work to begin her shift, that man drove down the street to a motherfucking payphone and tried calling the number she had just given him. When he found out that he had been given a wrong number, he was incredibly angry. So he waited outside Jennifer's place of employment until the next morning, which is absolutely unsettling. Now, I just realized that I forgot to give you guys some trigger warnings, which sometimes I do forget because I figure this is a true crime podcast. You guys get a chance to see what the episode is about before you hit play. But obviously there's going to be, let me give them to you now because I feel bad that I didn't say it in the beginning. There's trigger warnings for abduction. There's trigger warnings for rape. There's trigger warnings for murder. There's going to be trigger warnings for self-harm. There's going to be trigger warnings for abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, all the things. I mean, this isn't a good story. So you've been warned. So, sorry I didn't do it sooner. I'll try to get better at that, okay? Anyway, when Jennifer walked outside the following morning, when her shift was over, she saw the man's car from the night before parked down the street close to the bus stop. She wasn't scared. She just thought to herself that it was probably best if she began walking in the opposite direction. So she did, even though it was more desolate in that direction. It wasn't long before Jennifer could hear his car driving slowly behind her and then alongside her. Jennifer could hear the sounds of the gravel crunching underneath the tires. When she looked up and made eye contact with the man, he invited her to go out to breakfast. Again, she told him that she didn't have time to get breakfast, and he offered to just give her a ride home instead. Jennifer felt incredibly awkward because she again didn't want to hurt the man's feelings, but she was just not interested in him. But on the other hand, she also did not want to have to ride the bus home if it wasn't necessary. She figured that this guy was not dangerous. If he was going to do something to hurt her, he had the perfect opportunity to do that the night before. So Jennifer opened the door and got into the man's car. As he was driving, he casually mentioned the phone number she had given him the night prior and asked her what number that was. She responded that it was the number to her work, but the pleasant stranger who had picked Jennifer up suddenly snapped and became a totally different person. Jennifer was in the middle of talking to him, and the man suddenly pulled over, grabbed her by the hair, and smashed her head into the dashboard. He had exploded into sudden anger over the fake telephone number she'd given him the night before. He put a gun to her head, and Jennifer just kept repeating, "Is this a joke? Is this a joke?" over and over again. And all he would say in response was, "Shut up, bitch. Shut up, bitch." He was angry, and his evil side was obviously coming out. The man had an explosive temper. He was a hater of women, and Jennifer was about to find out he was violent and evil. The man opened the glove compartment, and Jennifer saw that he also had a knife and some twine. He pulled out the twine and wrapped it around Jennifer's hands. He put a pair of sunglasses and a hat on her and then moved her seat all the way back into a reclining position. The man tried to get Jennifer to perform oral sex on him, but he could not get an erection, and that made him even more angry. He took it out on Jennifer by punching her in the head numerous times. As the man kept driving, all she could see from the position of her seat were telephone poles. Each telephone pole the car passed made her more and more fearful. She could tell that they were going further and further and deeper into the desert. She felt doomed, and she was in a state of shock. She kept trying to think of how she could get out of this situation, but she really had no answer. Jennifer knew that the man was definitely going to hurt her, and she knew that she was going to be raped. She pleaded with the man, telling him that she would do anything he wanted. She would rob a bank with him. He could rape her. It didn't matter. Now, Jennifer made an amazing as hell YouTube video recounting this abduction. And in this video, she mentioned that she didn't really care about getting raped at the time. She felt that, at least in her mind, there were worse things that could happen to her besides sexual assault. I think she was trying to do anything she could at that point to survive and still keep some sense of control. And I am listing this YouTube video on the top of my case sources. Y'all need to watch it. It is amazing to hear her tell her story. Initially, the case sources I was using were some other interviews that she did on TV, and those were the first things that popped up when I started my research. And I had pretty much all of my notes ready to go on this podcast episode, and I came across this YouTube video that she made herself, and I was like, oh my goodness, there was so much more information that the TV stations would not allow her to talk about, or they cut it out and didn't include it. So she was angry and unhappy about that. So she decided to make her own YouTube video. It's like actually at the scene of this incident. She's amazing. She's so strong. You guys have to listen to it. So if you have time, totally click on it. Look in the case sources and click on it, or just do a Google search. It's going to pop up. It is so awesome. Anyway, when the man finally parked and turned off the ignition of his car, he reached over and used the knife to cut Jennifer's shorts off. Then he cut off her underwear. She was wearing a sweatshirt, but instead of cutting that off, the man managed to just cut off and remove Jennifer's bra. He climbed over her and straddled her lap as she still sat reclined in the seat. He started punching her in the head over and over again. She could see the evil and the rage in his eyes. The man tried to rape her, but again, he couldn't get it up. Jennifer had never been sexually active with anyone before, but she did know enough to be scared. She knew that this man's erectile dysfunction was going to be a problem and make him more and more angry at her. She told him that it was okay and that she would do whatever he wanted to do. He just sat there quietly for a moment, unmoving. Jennifer could see that his eyes were just black and evil. She felt like she was looking into the eyes of the devil. And personally, I know this exact feeling. I've been in a position before with an abusive partner. I've never been abducted, but I've been in an abusive relationship. And I remember his eyes looking the exact same way. There were no whites of the eyes at all, just blackness, and it's some scary shit. Suddenly, the man told Jennifer to tell him that she loved him. Like, what the fuck? Of course she's going to do whatever he wanted, if that was what it would take to save her life. She struggled with this, though, since she had been raised in a family and household that never expressed love for each other. She wanted it to sound real, but she literally had no experience with those 3 words, which is super sad when you think about it, right? When Jennifer said, "I love you," the man smacked her across the face and said, "You're lying, bitch. Say it like you mean it." Again, she said, "I love you." And he said, "You're lying. Say it like you mean it." He grabbed her underwear and shoved them so far into Jennifer's mouth that they were in her throat. His whole fist literally went into her mouth, and he just kept yelling, "Tell me you love me. Tell me you love me. Tell me you love me." And Jennifer started crying. She felt like if she could say it just the right way, he might just stop. But deep down inside, Jennifer did know he wasn't going to stop. So now he was even more angry than he had been before. The man grabbed Jennifer by the throat and he started strangling her. Suddenly, Jennifer couldn't see anything at all. She felt like she could hear music, and everything suddenly turned white. All she could feel at that time, interestingly enough, was love. She closed her eyes because she didn't want this man to be the last thing she ever saw. She thought about everyone she knew and sent out unconditional love to every single person in her life. She may have just passed out, but Jennifer said in that YouTube video that she truly believes that in that moment, she had passed away. And she was upset that some of the TV shows she did wouldn't allow her to say that. They cut out anything she said about dying or passing away. Jennifer could not entirely put into words what she experienced exactly. But all she knew was at that time, she was happy. But moments later, she was jolted back to reality. She described it like when you're suddenly jolted awake when you're asleep and you're not sure where you're at or what's going on or what fucking day it is. I've been there. How about you? The man was trying to revive Jennifer. He was bashing her around, pushing on her chest. Jennifer came back into it and just thought to herself, oh gosh, I'm back in this nightmare again. She truly wanted to die because there was no other way of getting out of there. But it seems like the man didn't want to allow her to die. After she regained consciousness, the man began sucking on her neck. She could feel what she thought was his saliva and his fucking slobber running down her neck. He was still straddled across her lap at this point, and when he sat back up, Jennifer saw the blood all over his mouth and the skin hanging from between his teeth. Jennifer realized he had just bit a chunk of skin out of her neck. She wasn't feeling any pain though, which is a good thing at least. 6 years earlier, on the evening of January 18th of 1986, a popular outgoing 23-year-old named Robin Brandley was working as an usher at a jazz concert at Saddlebrook College in Mission Viejo, California. Robin was the type of person who was always willing to lend a hand to anybody. Robin's brother and her parents, Jack and Janelle Riley, agree that Robin was a go-getter with big dreams. She loved to make people laugh. She was intelligent, inquisitive, and she had a lot of friends. She was bound and determined to make a mark on the world. After the concert was over, Robin walked toward her car, but she never made it there. There in the dark parking lot, someone was waiting for her with a knife. She was later found by a security guard at the college. He noticed something that he believed to be a mannequin laying on the ground next to a car. But guys, what do we always say in these podcasts? It's never a mannequin. It's never, ever, ever a mannequin. Not ever. Never. It was later determined that Robin had been stabbed 41 times. 41 stab wounds to the back, neck, chest, and hands. It was so unexplained, and it was so random, and it was brutal. There wasn't any evidence at all of a robbery. Her purse was still laying there. Her keys were laying on the ground of the crime scene as well. And there was nothing left at the scene that was of any help in identifying who the perpetrator had been. Whoever it was had basically come in from the darkness of the night, attacked quickly, suddenly, and violently. There was no way that Robin could have gotten away. And then he went back into the darkness of the night. Unfortunately for investigators, there were no witnesses. Months passed, then years. Robin's parents tried desperately to keep her story alive. They hired a private investigator, even believed the murderer might be a fellow student, but nothing was ever found. Over the years, Robin Brandley's sadistic killer would go on to kill again and again. But of course, no one knew that as Jennifer Asbenson lay terrified in the stifling trunk of that same killer's car. The stranger had forced her into the trunk of his car, but Jennifer had no idea that he was taking her to his favorite killing ground. It was pitch black inside the trunk of the car, but with her hands bound, there wasn't anything that she could do. After murdering Robin Brandley, her attacker went on a killing spree. Before he was finished, 4 other California women would die. The women were all sex workers and were dumped in the windswept desert just outside the city. Julie McGee was the first in the summer of 1988. She had been picked up in Palm Springs, taken out to this area of town that's pretty much abandoned, and was shot and killed. There was virtually no evidence left behind. The following year, Tammy Irwin was killed. A few years after that, Denise Maney was tied up with twine and tortured. Then in nearby San Diego, a 4th sex worker named Mary Ann Wells was shot dead. 4 victims and similar crimes, but no one who investigated any of these crimes spotted any kind of a pattern. No one connected the crimes, and certainly they did not realize that they were the work of a serial killer. As Jennifer Asbenson lay in the trunk, terrified, the driver of the vehicle was barreling down the highway. Desperate, she did the one thing that could bring her some comfort. She began to pray. She remembered her grandmother telling her that any time she was in distress, that she should pray. So that's what she did. She just started crying and praying, God, if there's a God and you know that I'm in this trunk right now and you know that I'm about to be cut up into many pieces, please take my life or let me get away. Because at that time, Jennifer said that she didn't know what she believed in. She didn't know if she believed that there was a God or not. She only remembered that core memory of her grandmother telling her about the power of prayer. And what happened next was pure and simple, and I don't care what your spiritual beliefs are. We all have our own beliefs. What happened next was nothing short of divine intervention. Jennifer suddenly felt a huge rush of calmness come over herself. And then she just started hearing all of the twine busting open behind her back. She described it as literally a bunch of popping sounds. The twine had broken all on its own. It was a miracle. In the total darkness, with her life on the line, Jennifer discovered a confidence and ingenuity that surprised even her. While inside that trunk, all she had to do was reach from one corner to the other corner and say, "This is the width of the truck." And then she slapped her hands together and thought, "That's where the lock is. The mechanism to unlock the trunk is on the inside. It's with me." So working only by feeling, Jennifer ripped away the carpeting, she yanked on the wires, and she poked her fingers all around that metal frame. Suddenly, she felt a little lever. It clicked, And suddenly, she saw light coming in from everywhere. She got so excited that she lifted the trunk up even more. Suddenly, the man was shouting and swearing from inside the car. He'd realized that the trunk was open, so he pulled over and came around to the back of the car. Jennifer had grabbed the trunk and pulled it back down. She knew that if the man opened it, she was going to be killed. But the man pushed down on the trunk to make sure it was shut, and then he just got back into the car. As he pushed the gas pedal all the way to the floor, he got stuck in the soft sand. Jennifer realized that this might be her only chance. She flipped open the trunk again and she jumped out. She was barefoot and she was naked from the waist down, but she ran for her life down the road. She was running like she was in the Olympics. There was one car coming alongside her. Sprinting alongside the car, Jennifer begged the older couple inside the car for help. But unfortunately, the woman beat her husband with her purse and said to him, "No, go." So the couple sped up and they drove away without helping Jennifer. Right after that, Jennifer looked back and saw what the woman had been afraid of. The man was chasing after her with a machete in his hand. So she started running away even faster, and that's when she saw a truck coming. Gasping for breath, this time Jennifer ran straight towards the oncoming truck. She heard their wheels screech, and two startled men who were inside the truck opened the door. They just so happened to be Marines. Jennifer just started screaming and trying to communicate with them and let them know what was happening to her. But when they turned and looked, the man's car was gone. Jennifer's attacker had already sped off and gotten away. Jennifer had survived her ordeal, but over the coming weeks, that brought her very little relief. Jennifer's life soon began to unravel. It was the beginning of a downhill journey for her. She started getting so scared out of her mind by everything. And the fact that the man knew her name, knew where she lived, he knew a lot about Jennifer. But police knew absolutely nothing about him. They had no suspects, no witnesses, and no leads whatsoever. Interest in Jennifer's case began to fade, as did the scars on her wrists. Jennifer actually took a razor to those scars and opened them all the way back up, just to get people to talk to her about what had happened again. A friend of hers reportedly contacted someone to help, and one morning Jennifer woke up in a mental hospital strapped to a bed. This is where she would live for the next 3.5 to 4 years. On one hand, they were keeping an eye on her to make sure that she no longer continued to self-harm, but it was also the only place where Jennifer could feel safe. Her attacker had disappeared into the desert dust, but Jennifer knew that somewhere he was still out there. On a hot day in 1996, Detective McGrath responded to what's called a body dump at a desolate lake outside the city. There was a nude female body floating face down about 20 feet off the shore. It was obvious she died a violent death. She was shot 3 times and had 29 stab wounds. The detective had never seen anything quite like that before, and he was quite disturbed. He could see that this crime was very unique in and of itself. Whoever had done this had showed a lot of emotion, a lot of rage, and a lot of anger towards the victim. Police soon identified the woman as Lynn Huber, a local sex worker. As to who killed her, one piece of that puzzle fell into place quickly. When Detective McGrath got back to the office, the buzz going around the department was that this had actually been the second body found in Wolf Lake. 4 months earlier, the naked body of another sex worker had been found floating in that same lake. Laura Oilacki had been shot in the head and the chest. I think that's how we say her name. And there was something else. Just 1 month before Laura's body had been discovered, the body of a third sex worker by the name of Cassandra Coram was found dumped in the Vermilion River. Now, the Vermilion River is just an hour away from Wolf Lake. The case fell to Cook County Assistant State's Attorney Jim McKay. McKay said that investigators could find no real link among the three murders until they checked ballistics. They found that the bullets that were used to murder all three of the women were fired from the same gun, which had been a .38 caliber revolver. Unfortunately for police, there's a lot of those guns out there, and without the actual gun, the case ended up going cold. But in April 1997, Indiana police contacted Detective McGrath with a tip. A sex worker had called them from a seedy motel. The sex worker told them that she and her customer, a man named Andrew, were having a fight. And they were having a fight partly over his unusual requests. When they learned what the guy had wanted to do to her and where he wanted to do it, they began to focus on this man. Apparently, he had wanted to duct tape and handcuff the sex worker and then take her in the back of his pickup truck out to Wolf Lake. Knowing all too well what had happened at Wolf Lake, this sex worker wasn't having any part of it. Andrew Urdiales, who was 32 years old, was a security guard at an Eddie Bauer store on Chicago's Michigan Avenue. Urdiales had been arrested months earlier in Indiana for illegal possession of a firearm, which police had confiscated. The curious thing was that the weapon was a .38 revolver, Smith & Wesson, one of millions. But on a hunch, Detective McGrath and his partner retrieved that gun. Literally just a week before it was scheduled to be destroyed, which is crazy. Talk about timing. They raced to get the weapon to the Illinois Crime Lab. What Detective McGrath called, quote-unquote, a shot in the dark, definitely hit its mark, though. Tests proved that Urdiales' gun had fired the bullets that killed all three of the women. Police were astonished. It was incredible, and it was a stroke of luck. On April 22nd, 1997, the detectives set up surveillance outside the working-class home Urdiales shared with his parents. At 9 a.m. in the morning, Urdiales came out the back door and started walking down the alley. The police approached him and identified themselves. Urdiales was nonchalant about this. He was dressed in his guard uniform, holding his little brown lunch bag, heading to work. Police told him that they had a few questions. He cooperated and asked them if he could give them a lift back to the train when they were done so that he could get to work. Once they got to the precinct, Urdiales was just as helpful. He was downright chatty. He was volunteering to them that he was an ex-Marine and he had once been stationed in California. He didn't seem to have a chip on his shoulder or any type of attitude whatsoever. He was actually very cooperative. First, he was asked if he knew Laura Oilacki, Cassandra Coram, or Lynn Huber. He was shown pictures of all three of the women, but of course he denied knowing them. Then he was asked about the gun he had been arrested with. Police asked him if he had ever loaned the gun out to anyone else, and Urdiales responded with no. In fact, Urdiales bragged big time that he'd always been careful to keep that gun locked up in a tackle box in his basement, and nobody else had a key. Bingo. Gotcha, motherfucker. It was then that the police laid the bomb on him. They informed him that the gun, to the exclusion of every other gun in the entire world, was the murder weapon that had killed the three women in Illinois. Urdiales just looked down. He loosened his tie and said, "I guess I won't be going to work today." Urdiales had a shocker of his very own after that. He then told the police, "Well, you might want to call California." And police said, "Okay, why would we want to call California?" Urdiales responded with, "Yeah, there are some open homicides that they probably would like to know about." Whoa. Within hours of learning about Urdiales' confession, Palm Springs Lieutenant John Booth and Orange County investigator Helen Marino arrived in Chicago. It wasn't until they got there and were briefed that the magnitude of what was happening started setting in. Like, can you even imagine? Like, wow, this guy is a prolific serial murderer. In a cramped room at the precinct, Lieutenant Booth sat down to chat with Urdiales, who declined all offers for a lawyer. Booth describes Urdiales' demeanor as being, quote unquote, very matter of fact. He wasn't scared. He wasn't upset. Urdiales told investigators he had grown up in a close-knit family with loving parents, but he admitted that other relationships never had come easily to him. He really did not have close friends. He was a loner. And after a frustrating stint in the military, he was honorably discharged and moved back home to his parents' home in Chicago. He took a job as a security guard and was even voted union representative. There was no doubt that Urdiales was leading a double life. When he wasn't at work, when he wasn't at home with his family, he was out trying to pick up sex workers. And God forbid if they did anything to piss him off. If they did that, they were going to die. To the investigators, Urdiales matter-of-factly described exactly how each and every woman had died, and how he had tortured and killed 8 different women. Urdiales remembered every single detail. We're talking years and years and years later, remembering what they had said, what color of flip-flops one of them had been wearing, what color underwear they had on. Urdiales said about one of his victims, "I remember she was wearing like a one-piece, like a jumpsuit, short-sleeved and short here. She had on like a bunch of necklaces on her neck." Booth says all the details about what the victims had been wearing and where he dumped them were spot on. He even went down to the shoes and said they weren't leather tennis shoes, they were cloth tennis shoes. And Booth says, Tammy Irwin, that's exactly what Tammy had been wearing. She had cloth tennis shoes on. And because Urdiales knew the details so well, He had probably relived his crimes several times. It was etched into his brain. Robin Brantley's murder at Saddleback College in 1986 was his first murder, Urdiales said. He was a Marine stationed at Camp Pendleton. He said it began with some unexplained incident at the base, something that set him off. He got in his car and just started driving. Urdiales said, I don't know, I was just getting aggravated, pissed off about something. I was just driving around that area and I noticed a sign that said Saddleback College, so I stopped and I just parked my car. I was walking and I had my knife with me. I don't know why. When he spotted Robin Brantley walking to the parking lot, he hid behind a car. Urdiales said, I started walking towards her, behind her, and she turned around and looked but didn't say anything. But then she saw the knife and she screamed briefly, and I put my hands over her mouth. I think I said I wanted her purse. The next thing I know, the knife went into her back once, twice, several times, and then he sighed. Investigators were convinced that Robin Brantley was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Urdiales wanted to hurt somebody that was weaker than him. He wanted to hurt somebody that was vulnerable. But there is no big answer to the question of why. One would have to get inside the evil mind of Urdiales to figure that one out. There was a great deal of hatred and rage, certainly behind each and every one of those stab wounds. He didn't even know Robin. She had not done anything to him. That rage surfaced again and again and again over the next few years as Urdiales became a smarter and a more methodical killer. He planned a lot of these murders. He prepared himself not only to kill, but to get away with killing. Urdiales was so prepared that in the years after he'd left California, he kept equipment for his killings in a storage locker near Palm Springs. It was his special murder kit. The murder kit contained a .45 caliber pistol, ammunition, a machete, masks, license plates from Illinois, shovels, twine, and duct tape. Urdiales would fly into town, rent a car, grab his murder kit, then pick up a woman and kill her in the desert. Which, this just fucking freaks me out, guys, because it is so similar to Israel Keyes, how he would have murder kits stashed all over the place. I mean, Urdiales only had, one special murder kit in that storage locker. He didn't, go bury them all over the fucking United States, but it's so similar and so eerie. But anyways, it was a vacationing Urdiales who picked up Jennifer Asbenson at the bus stop in September of 1992. As with all the women, Urdiales remembered every last detail. Urdiales said, I looked over and I pulled down the window and asked her, do you need a ride? And she didn't really hesitate. She got up and she got in the car. She was a very pretty girl, had her hair tied up in the back. The detective asked, do you remember what she was wearing? And Urdiales said, well, I remember she was wearing a gray sweatshirt. The detective said, okay, what else? Urdiales said she had on white, like sandal type shoes. His story matched Jennifer's exactly. Urdiales went on to say, I told her to turn around and I tied her hands behind her back. And suddenly I had my hands on her neck. I just started squeezing her, choking her with my hands, and I put her in the trunk. But then suddenly, before I could get out there, I seen the hood kind of pop open, and she had her hands free at the time, and she went screaming. And he admitted at the time that he was furious at the fact that Jennifer had escaped. Urdiales went on to say, I just got in the car and sped off. I just left a big cloud of dust. So that was the last time I saw her. But he will see her again. She was his only surviving victim, and she would go on to confront him in court, because that's what badasses fucking do. The savage attack that nearly took her life had continued to haunt Jennifer Asbenson all those years. In 1997, 5 years after her attack, a police officer knocked on Jennifer's door and asked her to come down to the station. He said to her, I'm going to put 10 pictures on the table, and I want you to tell me if anybody looks familiar. Jennifer's eyes went right to the photo of Urdiales, and she said, he's right there. The police officer picked up the picture, and he asked, do you know who this is? Jennifer told him, it's the man that attacked me, that tried to kill me. It was then that the police officer told her, this is a man that killed 8 women, and you are the only one that got away. 3 weeks later, Jennifer came face to face with her attacker at a pre-trial hearing in Chicago. She had been brought there by a syndicated TV show. Jennifer said that it was just sickening when she saw her attacker again. After the hearing was out, she tried to get answers from his family. She was screaming at them out in the street. Why? Why did he do this? You had no idea that he was a maniac like this? You had no idea? When they got across the street, Jennifer suddenly saw his sister stop. And then she turned around and started hustling back across the street towards Jennifer. Urdiales' sister said to her, giving her a big hug, we don't even understand this ourselves. I'm really sorry. That's all I can say to you. That's all I can say to you. I'm sorry. Jennifer was so relieved when his sister had hugged her. It was a sign that they cared. Now, I don't know. I didn't go into how big his family was. I think that he was one of 6 children, if I remember right, but I didn't put it in my notes because I really don't give a fuck about Urdiales. So I do want to mention, though, that it's been reported that Urdiales had been sexually molested by one of his sisters when he was a kid. He did not have a great upbringing. You know, there was a lot of dysfunction in his home. I don't really want to rally around him because he sucks. And I really want to celebrate Jennifer and her survival and everything else that she is doing since, you know, getting away from Urdiales. So I really don't want to talk about him. You know, but just know that there is some information out there. I don't know if the sister that ran across the street and hugged Jennifer is the same sister that was fucking molesting him and helping him turn into that monster, because I'm certain that his upbringing had something to do with it. I'm not 100% convinced that people are just born evil. I really feel that they're nurtured that way. It's not like the nature thing. I mean, I guess it's possible. There are probably going to be some cases that I do that I'm like, oh yeah, that fucker was born evil. But in this case, like, just what I read about him, he did not have a great upbringing. But then again, it's not an excuse for him. Like, I'm just so disgusted, and I'm just so happy that there was a survivor. And Jennifer is just so amazing, and her story is just so astounding. And like, I just really feel like, without getting all preachy at you guys, I feel that she is still here on this earth for a reason, to spread her story, to help people. And that's why I just really want to focus as much as I can about her, Okay? Because she didn't have a great upbringing either, but she didn't turn into a fucking murderer, right? Anyway, so 5 years later, Urdiales finally went on trial for the murders of 2 of the Illinois women. Jennifer took the stand. She said it was hard, testifying with Urdiales just sitting right there. Like, she would look at him, but he was never looking at her. And he didn't have any emotion whatsoever to anything that Jennifer said. In agonizing detail, Jennifer told the jury how Urdiales had sexually assaulted and tortured her that day. The jury cried while Jennifer testified. I can only imagine how heart-wrenching that was to hear. Jennifer wasn't just speaking for herself, though. She was speaking on behalf of the 8 other women that needed justice. She felt that what he did to her was minimal, but what he did to them and their families is forever, and he needed to pay. Jennifer told Urdiales in court, "I sincerely forgive you. That doesn't mean you don't deserve the death penalty. I hope you can find God." The jury agreed and rejected Urdiales' claim of insanity. They sentenced him to death. But in March of 2011, Illinois abolished the death penalty. Andrew Urdiales' death sentence was commuted to life in prison. But within hours of Illinois Governor Quinn's decision to commute all death sentences to life in prison, prosecutors in Orange County, California, sought the extradition of Urdiales. Yay! That way he could be tried in California for all of the murders he had done there. There were 5 women he had murdered while he was stationed at Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton and after he was discharged from the Marines. Urdiales' attorney, her name was Denise Gregg, argued in court that brain scans and psychological tests showed that her client had symptoms of someone afflicted with partial fetal alcohol syndrome. She claimed that the killer's mother was a steady drinker and she had drank heavily while she was pregnant with Urdiales. That brain damage, combined with a childhood of traumatic events, left him with trouble managing his anger and emotions. The U.S. Marine Corps veteran performed well in the structured environment of the military, she argued, but did poorly in less stable conditions. Urdiales told investigators that he got into spats with many of the women before he snapped and killed them, and that he would disassociate at times, so he wouldn't even have been consciously present during the murders. Senior Deputy District Attorney Matt Murphy argued that there was little evidence to prove Urdiales' childhood was as unhappy as his defense attorneys claimed. On May 23, 2018, Urdiales was convicted of the murders of all 5 Southern California women. And on Wednesday, June 13th of 2018, a jury rendered a death verdict for Urdiales. The jury had deliberated for just 1 day. That's all it took, just 1 day. On October 5th, 2018, Urdiales was again sentenced to death, this being his 3rd time. Orange County Superior Court Judge Greg Prickett ensured that Urdiales was sentenced to 5 consecutive death sentences, just in case any of his individual convictions were overturned or ever commuted by a future governor. So he was thinking clearly, that is for sure. Speaking in the courtroom, Urdiales said that he respects the jury's decision and probably would have done the same thing. He said, "I understand how they voted. If I were a juror on my case, I probably would have done the same thing. There's no hard feelings." And then he went on to speak to the victims' families. He said, "I'm a little shaken, actually, a little nervous." He offered sincere apologies to the jurors, the judge, the prosecutors, the victim's family, as well as his own family, for having to hear all of the gory details of his crimes. To the victims' families, he also said, "My condolences for their loss. That's all I can say." 3 people delivered victim impact statements in court, including the father of Tammy Irwin. His daughter was killed in Palm Springs in April of 1989. "I know that I miss her every day of my life," he said. "Urdiales not only killed my daughter, but he killed me inside. This has ruined my life. It has turned my physical being into pieces, my mental being into pieces." Orange County District Attorney said in a statement that the death penalty was the only just punishment for Urdiales. When you think about the serial killings and the terrible things he did, it's hard to think of Urdiales as a person. He's a human monster. He doesn't deserve to be on the planet with the rest of us. On Friday, November 2nd, 2018, at around 11:15 p.m., Urdiales was found unresponsive in his cell in the Adjustment Center of San Quentin State Prison. Urdiales was alone in his cell, and prison officials said the apparent cause of death was suicide by hanging. He was 54 years old. The fact that Urdiales finally paid for what he did has confirmed Jennifer's faith and given her a whole new appreciation for the joys of life. I love this. One of the joys being a 13-year-old daughter. She says, "My daughter Augusta is my little miracle. She gives me hope." Jennifer has talked with her daughter and says that her daughter knows the whole story of her abduction. When Augusta was asked what she thinks about her mother's escape, she replied, "I think that's amazing. When I think about it, it kind of just brings my faith stronger. And I know that I can do anything once I set my mind to it. And I have the confidence that, and I think it's just like what you think is impossible isn't always impossible." Jennifer says a day doesn't go by when she does not think about what happened to her. She said, "Really, I just wake up every day wanting to do something remarkable. And if I don't, I go to sleep at night and wake up the next day just wanting to do something remarkable again." She says, "I'm just grateful to be alive." And she sounds like a remarkable person. Jennifer Asbenson, now 49, has wrote a book called The Girl in the Treehouse. It's a memoir in which she recounted her ordeal and her path to healing in January 2019. According to her author's bio, Jennifer continues to be an advocate for the victims who cannot speak for themselves and continues to speak on behalf of mental health awareness. The author and advocate was diagnosed with PTSD, OCD, ADHD, bipolar disorder, depression, and anxiety. She spends her free time journaling and helping other PTSD survivors. She spends her time taking college courses and reading self-improvement books. She also loves to go on adventures with her support dog, Wesley. On the 24th anniversary of her kidnapping and escape, in 2017, Jennifer Asbenson returned to the scene where she was taken by Urdiales in Desert Hot Springs, California. Once there, she recorded herself speaking into the camera and recounting her ordeal. She said that she wanted everyone to hear everything in her own words without interruption. She wants them to feel like they were experiencing it with her. She's not ashamed or embarrassed to be a human, so she did not edit herself. She thought people would appreciate the rawness of it. And I did. She's speaking about that YouTube video. Go give it a watch. It's amazing. She's a wonderful human being. She's here for a reason. I'm so happy that she's, been able to move on, as difficult as it's been for her. She has a daughter, and she even recently got married in June of 2021. So, yeah. Pretty amazing story. And with that, that's the story. That's the story of Jennifer Asbenson and her survival. So if you enjoyed this episode, I would love it. You know what I'm going to say. Go give me a rating. Go leave me a review on Apple Podcasts if you listen there. Join my Patreon if you feel like supporting me monetarily. You can join for, just a few dollars a month. If you pay the $5 level, you get extra bonus content, which is cool. But even if you don't want to do that, it's okay. I appreciate you just listening, because every listen helps me in this venture. I'm really enjoying this, like I say, just about every episode, right? I kind of talk to you guys about how much I enjoy this. I do. I'm going to keep doing it. I just really love inspiring stories such as this one. So anyways, guys, until next time, stay safe, and you know it, keep talking crime.